All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second class of this six-class series. I see there's a new menu tonight, thank God. Somebody wants to eat dinner, right? You share. It's like if you're cold outside in the winter, you could warm yourself up by putting on a fur coat, or like a good Chabadnik, you could create a fire where others could receive the warmth. So you choose to make the fire rather than putting on a fur coat. It doesn't have to be a fur coat. So, they tell the story of the Jew, the Hindu, the politician who are going hiking down south. And they get lost. Boy, did they get lost. They have no idea where they are. There's no life in sight until finally, thank God, as it was getting dark, they see a light from the distance and they head towards the light. They make their way up the stairs of a small home. They knock on the door, hoping for some southern hospitality. And a middle-aged couple opens the door with a big smile, greets them and says, "You look a little lost." They said, "We are. Would you like to stay here the night?" "Of course. Thank you so much for offering before even asking." And the wife says, "It'd be our pleasure to host you, but there's one problem. We have a room with 2 beds, and there are 3 of you. One of you will have to sleep in the barn." "All right, we'll figure it out." They unpack their little bag. And the Hindu says, "You know what? I was taught humility in my religion. I'll go to the barn." And the Jew, the politician, go to sleep. 15 minutes pass, and there's a knock on the door in the bedroom. They open the door, it's the Hindu. He says, "As much as I would like to sleep in the barn, I'm not able to. It's against my beliefs." He says, "Why?" "In the barn is a cow. Cannot sleep with the holy cow." "All right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?" So the Jew goes, says, "Enjoy your evening." 15 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. There's a pig in the barn. I'm Jewish. Everybody knows pigs and Jews never really got along, at least in the tradition. So the politician says, "I guess there's no choice." So he goes to the barn, and the Jew and the Hindu go to sleep, and 15 minutes later there's a knock on the door, and the cow and the pig are standing there. If it went over your head, you didn't say enough l'chaim. I said the politician went to the bar. Okay. So, today's topic, holidays and holy days, the Jewish calendar. Some say that, speaking of food, maybe we could turn our phones off. Some say that the Jewish holidays consists of the fact that Jews sit together and eat. I guess even when it's not holidays. And why do we eat? Because they persecuted us, we survived, let us eat. Let us rejoice. Let us say l'chaim. Let us talk a little bit about the moon, the sun, the seasons, the holidays. We touched on it very briefly the other morning at the minyan that we had. I gave a little brief kind of synopsis of how the system works, but I would like to go into it in more depth. Measuring and marking time has been around for many, many, many years, since the very beginning. There are actually more than 40 calendars. The most well-known, of course, and widespread system is the solar calendar, based on the cycle of the sun. In Judaism, however, there's the lunar calendar that's based on the cycle of the moon. This is a very, very important distinction, as we'll discuss. because of the orbit around the Earth, the moon alternates between being fully exposed to sunlight, we call that the full moon, or being completely shadowed by the Earth, a moonless night. Right? We've all experienced this. The moons at various phases, at various stages. Of course, we have the crescent moon. How long does it take the moon to orbit from one phase, from one size, back to the exact same phase? 29 and a half days. Okay. So, the beginning of the Jewish month, because the month is sanctified based on the eyewitness, as we're going to discuss soon, the very beginning of the Jewish month, the moon is very, very small. It's barely noticeable. If it's a little bit cloudy at night, you're not going to see it. But if it's a clear night, you'll see it, but it's very, very small. The middle of the Jewish month, the moon is at its fullest. The end of the month, again, it's small. That's how it works. Now, the lunar year also has 12 months, ordinarily speaking, but not this year. This year is a leap year. We have 13 months. And I'm going to try, with the help of God, of course, nothing happens without Him, to explain it to the best of my ability so that you'll walk away today really understanding the system. I'm going to try to make it as easy and as simple as possible on a Monday night after a long day of work and whatever you do. 29 and a half days on average for this cycle means that the Jewish year on average is approximately 354 days. That is the calculation. Why? Because sometimes, as we're going to see soon, it's sanctified and it is a 29-day month. Sometimes it's a 30-day month. It depends. And I'm going to clarify that in a moment. So on average, a Jewish year is 354 days, whereas the solar year, our year, of course, is 365 and a quarter days, which means a leap year for the solar calendar is an extra day, right? Because you have the 365 and a quarter days. A leap year for the Jewish calendar, the lunar calendar, is an extra month. This year we have 2 Adars. It's a whole extra month. Now, why do we do this? Now, we know, of course, the calendar that we have in our seasons is dependent upon the Earth's rotation around the sun, or the sun around the Earth, depending on how you would like to see it. The Rebbe once asked somebody in a private audience, he said, the sun is here to serve the Earth. It would make sense to say that the sun orbits around the Earth. It's here to serve us, not the other way around. We're not going to get into that now. It's based on many factors. It's based on the tilted orbit, the distance that we are to the sun. That determines the seasons based on the orbit of the sun, or the orbit of the Earth around the sun. In other words, the seasons, based on our calendar, always fall out exactly the same time. July and August will always be in the summer. There's a certain consistency as it relates to the solar year. In other words, it's very boring. The lunar year is exactly the opposite. If the lunar calendar, the orbit of the moon, the 29 and a half days, every single month, right, times 12, equaling 29 or 30, the 354 days a year, we are at an 11-day deficit. So what? The problem is that one particular day, let's say July 1st, one particular day, or the 1st of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, will eventually make its way into every single one of the 4 seasons. Because if you have an 11-day deficit, how long will it take for one day on the calendar to reach all of the seasons? Any mathematicians here? 33 years. 33 years, a particular day will make its way into every single one of the 4 seasons. The problem is that Pesach, Passover, is a springtime holiday. And it must be celebrated in springtime, and we're going to explain that too. Sukkot is a holiday that belongs when? In the fall. But there's a problem, because the seasons work out well. Ellie, do you mind closing that door, please? And you can make sure it's unlocked. The seasons work out well if we are following the solar calendar. Does not work out very well if you're following the cycle of the moon, which we call the lunar calendar, or the Jewish calendar. So really, what we're about to explain will tell us that our calendar is actually a lunisolar system. It's not a lunar calendar. It's both. We borrow from the solar, we borrow from the sun. I just want to make one mention. Of course, questions and comments are always available, but I'm fairly confident that after we're done the class, you'll have most of your questions answered, if not all. Now, I'm putting myself in a hole there. But these classes, I prepared myself. I spent a lot of time on it because it's a very broad subject, and I needed to condense it into an hour. Difficult to do. And I made sure that the important points to really understand it on a simple level was achieved. At least, I believe so. We'll see. If not, you get your rebates at the door. So we combined elements of both the lunar and the solar calendars. This ensures that the festivals always are celebrated during the proper season. Pesach will always be in April time. I said April time. When did it start last year? In March. Late March. That was early. This year, it's being pushed into late April. You know why? Because we're adding a month this year. How often do we do this? 7 times in a 19-year period. Or every 2 to 3 years, we add another month to the year. It's a 13-month year. It's actually a good time that we're having this class because this year is a leap year. If not, we'd be celebrating Purim soon, right? And next month, Pesach. It's too soon. And again, we do this to make up for the 11-day deficit. Because if not, Pesach is going to make its way into September. Wrong season. All of this that I just told you is oral tradition that was taught to Moses at Mount Sinai. Moshe learned a lot of things at Mount Sinai during those 40 days and 40 nights. He had a big cup, a big Yiddish cup. Thank God for us. Now, it's interesting to note in a sidebar that the Jewish day begins at night, as it says in Genesis, and it was evening, and it was morning, day 1, and so forth. The months of the year, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, and so forth, they never used to have names. The names were month 1, month 2, month 3. During the Babylonian exile, these months were given names. What I'm about to say here is extremely important. And it's the idea of Kiddush HaChedesh, some of the most difficult laws in the Torah. I mentioned on Shabbat about the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, and the mind that he had. And at 13, at a bar mitzvah, he lectured in front of all the great rabbis many of them came to his bar mitzvah to hear his Torah and to hear his wisdom. And they were blown away by his clarity and the depth of his knowledge as it relates to Kiddush HaChedesh, sanctifying the moon, and the orbit, and the constellations, and so forth. During the time of the temple, the Sanhedrin, which is the Supreme Court in the Jewish Supreme Court, would determine when Rosh Chodesh was. This is a very important thing because without knowing when the first day of the Jewish month is, you don't know when the holidays are going to be. Pesach on the 15th day of Nisan will not exist unless you have a day 1 to get to day 15. Sukkot is on the 15th day of Tishrei. 15th day from what? From when? So sanctifying the new month is not just about knowing what the first day of the month is. It's knowing when the holidays are. And the holidays must be celebrated on the anniversary of when they occurred. And that's why sanctifying the new month is called sanctification. Kiddush HaChodesh. It's a holy act. There's a certain holiness because the holidays depend upon it. Now, this is how it worked. Number one, it's very important to note that the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, its members, its senior members, could link their lineage all the way back to whom? Moses. The Supreme Court in Jerusalem. They had the authority that Moses gave Joshua, his successor, to sanctify the new month, went down, chain, teacher to student, until the Sanhedrin. A direct link. So teacher gave the student the authority that was given to him, linked from Moshe. That's pretty powerful. Here's how it worked. The 29th day arrived. And it's approximately 29 and a half days. The way the moon and the new month was sanctified, and that would make it Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month, was through eyewitnesses. And as I said before, this is how it was. This is what Moshe taught at Sinai. 2 eyewitnesses would show up at the Supreme Court, and they would say, "We testify that we saw the birth of the new moon." Again, tiny. And the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, would say, "Really?" They would ask one of them to leave, and they would question him. They would interrogate him. I don't know about interrogate. They would investigate. Didn't do anything wrong. And they would ask him different questions. Where were you standing? What did it look like? Were there clouds in the sky? Whatever questions they would ask. Then they would say, "Thank you very much," and they would bring witness number 2. If all of the answers lined up to their satisfaction, the Supreme Court in Jerusalem, known as the Sanhedrin, would proclaim the new month. That's how it worked. In other words, sometimes the witnesses would see it on the 29th day, right? So they would sanctify it early. It's considered a early sanctification or a short previous month. If no witnesses came that day, what would they do? Would they need witnesses the next day? No, because the cycle of the moon, I said, was 29 and a half days, correct? If nobody came that day, automatically Rosh Chodesh was the next day, because it can't be more than that. So it was either 29 days or 30 days, based on what? Based on if eyewitnesses arrived to the Supreme Court to say whether or not they saw the new moon. But you only need the witnesses, and you only need that investigation if you want to sanctify it early, or at the first possible opportunity. In other words, a 29-day, as opposed to a 30-day. But if it's not done on the 29th day, no witnesses are necessary. The 30th day is Rosh Chodesh. That's how it works. Now, here's the problem. Do you ever hear the fact that outside of Israel we celebrate 2 days of holiday? Like on Shavuot, we eat cheesecake for 2 days. In Israel, 1 day. Besides Rosh Hashanah, which is 2 days all over, even in Israel, all the other holidays in Israel is 1 day. In America, in Japan, in Australia, in the diaspora, it's 2. Why? The answer is, it's quite simple. Because when they would rely on the eyewitnesses, it would take time for the messengers to go and travel wherever Jews live to let them know that, by the way, this and that day, 29th day was Rosh Chodesh. Oftentimes they would arrive when it was too late. What does it mean it was too late? The holiday that found itself during that month already passed. And they don't know, was Rosh Chodesh Monday or Tuesday? They were forced, therefore, to celebrate both days. What are both days? Both days mean assuming it was the 29th and assuming it was the 30th. They had no choice. They couldn't send out a tweet. They couldn't check their Facebook page. Right? They couldn't do that. And that's how it was. So people who lived in distant places, and by the way, when I say distant places, we're not talking about very far, but travel in those days was quite different than today, obviously. Sometimes there were unpaved roads. Sometimes the horse would decide to take a rest for a couple of days. I don't know when Pesach is. So what am I going to do? I'm going to celebrate 2 days, which means I'm going to make sure that I'm celebrating one of these 2 days is the day, assuming it was the 29th or the 30th. But in Israel, they didn't have to do that because they were local. As soon as the news spread, or soon after, even a day or two after, for a holiday that's celebrated on the 15th of the month, it's not a problem. They could find out 24, 48 hours after. Then they'll know how to calculate when Pesach starts, when Sukkot starts. They're local. It doesn't take 3 weeks to get the information. They're within the confines of Israel. So that's why they only celebrated 1 day holiday. What day was it? The day, 15 days, for instance, after Rosh Chodesh. Is that clear? However, Rosh Hashanah is different. Rosh Hashanah is celebrated 2 days even in Israel. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh. It's the first of Tishrei. It's that day, Bay Bayim. So even in Israel, they could also find out the news late. How late? A day late. It's too late. So they celebrate 2 days, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh in Israel. That's how it was. Now, here's the way we got our calendar. I'm not talking about the Chabad Laguna Nagel calendar. With all due respect, it's a beautiful calendar, and you should pick one up on the way out.
I have a question about Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, let me finish this. When the Roman Empire became Christian under Constantine, and the rabbis realized the very dark reality. What was it? There was a decree of not allowing Jews to follow the authority of the Supreme Court of Israel, of the rabbis. You know what they were looking at? They were looking at a total collapse of the system, sanctifying the new month, the calendar, knowing when to celebrate the holidays, Judaism, all of Judaism. And they're going to forget how the calendar is done. They're going to not have the holidays, the Rosh Chodesh. It's a disaster. What did they do at that point? Hillel the elder decided it is time to establish a fixed calendar. What did Hillel do? Hillel calculated, Hillel sanctified, and declared all of the subsequent months and years to come till today of when Rosh Chodesh is. He calculated, he sanctified, he declared all of the subsequent months and years until 5779, 2019, and beyond. And therefore, the calendar that we use today is based on these calculations and sanctifications. Why did he do this? Because he had no choice. Because the system of the eyewitnesses and Jews relying on the Supreme Court of Israel was about to be abolished. It was being threatened. By whom? By Constantine, by the Roman Empire. The question, of course, is why do we have the same system today if it's a fixed calendar? It should be the same in Israel as it is in the diaspora today, because we don't have that discrepancy, right, of the eyewitnesses coming late. That's the big question. There's several answers to this. There's a concept of minhag aveseinu biyadenu, that The custom of our elders are near and dear to us, and therefore we keep the tradition the way it was then. We keep the custom of our fathers. The Talmud offers another reason, the possibility of the calendar system collapsing during times of persecution within exile. Some say that there's a certain kedusha, there's a certain holiness in the land of Israel. And therefore the holidays and the energy and the inspiration that one is supposed to receive from the holidays could be achieved in one day in Israel, but it takes two outside of Israel. Okay? And there's a third reason, amongst others, to remember the good old days. What are the good old days? In the time when the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, would hear the word of Hashem, the system and the witnesses, and our desire to have that come back with the coming of Mashiach. And that's why we keep it the way it is. But technically, the way it is in Israel should be the way it is here, because it's a fixed calendar. It's not based on the eyewitnesses. So I just wanted to make that clear. You had a question?
About Rosh Chodesh, Rabbi. Why we celebrate sometimes one day and sometimes 2 days Rosh Chodesh? What?
Because of the calculation that I just mentioned. Because sometimes it was 29 days. And sometimes it was 30 days. Sometimes the witnesses would come on the 29th day, and sometimes the witnesses would come on the 30th day. The average year, Jewish calendar year, based on the cycle of the moon, and you could see it outside, you see how accurate it is, because it's always full on the 15th day, right? What is the average? 354. If you do the math on 354, you will see sometimes it's 29 and sometimes it's 30. And that's why sometimes it's 1 and sometimes it's 2.
How far out did he have to, how many years out did he have to calculate?
All the way.
All the way.
He averaged it out, as I just told him, in this way. And so therefore the calculations always work. The calculations that I just mentioned to our friend here. Jews are compared to the moon. The Egyptians used to, amongst other things, worship the sun. Why are Jews compared to the moon, the cycle of the moon? Because, as we know, the moon starts off very, very small. And then it grows larger and larger, and it looks like we're doing good. We reach the 15th of the month, and then it starts to slide. At the end of the Jewish month, it looks like it disappeared. Some would say, it's gone. Where are the Jewish people? We've gone extinct, God forbid. The orbit, the cycle of the moon, reflects and represents the state of the Jewish people throughout history. Also, it's a beautiful thing. The moon reflects its own light. No. It reflects the light of the sun. The Jewish people, we reflect the light of Hashem, of Torah, of mitzvahs. We don't give off our own light. We want to shine, live like a Jew, represent Hashem in the world, and like the moon, it will reflect off you. First commandment, my friends, that Hashem gave the Jewish people before leaving Egypt was to establish a calendar. Why was it so important? Because without the calendar, without Rosh Chodesh, there are no holidays. You can't just celebrate a holiday whenever. I'm feeling Pesachdik, so let's bring out the matzah and the maror. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you could always have a nice glass of wine, but the Egyptians used to worship, as I said before, the sun. The sun doesn't exhibit any obvious cycles. It remains constant, a constant presence in the sky, as I mentioned before, year after year. By contrast, the moon appears, the moon disappears. It cycles between non-existence and existence every single month. Listen to what this represents. The pagan focus of the Egyptians on the sun is based on the belief that life is constant and unchanging. What does that mean? You have no free will. You are who you are. You have no possibility for change. Or everything is predetermined. So just accept it. Live with it. That is represented in the sun. The constancy of the sun. Not fluctuating, but being constant in the sky. Judaism, and as I said before, representing the fluctuation and the constant change, appearing, not appearing, existing, not existing of the moon, represents our attitude towards life. And what is our attitude? That the human being have free will. And we have the ability to choose what life we want to have. No matter what setback we may have had, no matter how bad yesterday was or today was, tomorrow could be completely different. In fact, the next minute could be completely different. If you only desire so and put your your best foot forward. I want to share something without any details. Is that okay? Me sitting here and giving you a class tonight is a little miracle because of the kind of day I had today. And in the morning, and I knew what was happening in the morning, and I said to myself, God, you got to help me out here. I can't first of all, I don't want to cancel the class. Number two, how am I going to tell everybody that there's no class? People are going to show up. I'm going to have to make this happen. But the odds were stacked against me, big time. There's just too many things. And I said a prayer. And I looked at the sky when I said the prayer, which is why a shul is supposed to have windows. I don't know what is wrong with this shul. And I said, God, you got to help me here. Right? And all that came to my mind is take one foot ahead of the next. Try your best. That's all you have to do. And here I am giving the class. And I even had a chance to prepare before. That's a change, being strong, making things happen against all odds, and I'm just sharing that as an example, just happened today, is something we all have the ability to do. When do we not have the ability to do? When we convince ourselves we can't do it. We are our own best friend or our own worst enemy. That is the deal. It's about perspective. We have to learn to be bigger people. Small people give up without trying, or say there's too many things I have going on today. I'm going to have to do it another day. We have much more in our tank, much more ability, all of us. And I speak to myself as much as I speak to you, maybe more so, than we give ourselves credit for. And sometimes the unimaginable, little borderline miraculous is possible. This is all represented in the moon. It's disappearing. It's going extinct. I have free will. I have willpower. I wasn't asked by God to do something that's not within my ability. What is required, what is incumbent upon me, is to make the best out of my life. And I cannot know unless I can honestly look in the mirror and tell myself I tried my best. And by the way, that's always difficult to do. Could anybody honestly say for certain that you've given it or your all? I can't. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's interesting. The Rebbe once told that to somebody. I'm doing all that I could do. To make a statement like that, you got to be a Rebbe. But for you and me, it's difficult to honestly say that. And this is why the focus is on the moon. This inspiration and this thought reminds us every single day and every single month, every single cycle of the moon, that we have the ability of renewal, of starting again. Remember I told you once, it says that God created man in his image. It's an amazing thing. What image does God have? I thought God has no image. I thought any image of God is idolatry. That's exactly the point. God has no image, and you also should not have an image. Why do you paint yourself a certain way? Why do we stuff ourselves in a certain box and say, this is who I am because of what happened to me or because of whatever? You could change. You could reinvent yourself. Be light on your feet. Don't take yourself so seriously. Take your mission seriously, not you. And things will happen. It's an incredible thing. Don't have an image like God has no image. All those things I don't like about myself, all those skeletons, I could reinvent myself and be a different person. Now, of course, Tanya teaches the certain aspects in the hard drive that will never change, and there's nothing wrong about that. All we need to do is harness and channel the animal within us, right? The proverbial bull in the china shop. Take that bull and bring him to the field, and he will plow and do very productive work for you. Chodesh, which is the month, is like the word Chadesh, which means new. Shana, which is the year, the solar year, because we have the month cycle. The solar is the year cycle. It's like Shinun, which means repetition. It's constant. It's the same. Not a good attitude to look at your life as the same old, and to get so burnt out before you reach the age of 30. Not healthy. Judaism and Jewish tradition views time as a spiral. I remember as a kid in Brooklyn visiting the Statue of Liberty. Has anybody ever been there? The Statue of Liberty, you're walking up the steps like a spiral, all the way up. Are you going to make it to the crown? Are you going to make it to the torch? Right? This is before they closed it and all the Mishigas with the... Every period, let's say it's the first of Tishrei, we reach the same spot with the same spiritual energy as we did last year in the spiral, but one level higher, because we ought to grow throughout our life. If we're in the same spot like a helicopter, this is not good. We cannot helicopter, we can't hover. We're either ascending or descending. That's how it is. And a Jew, a human being, always has to progress. A tree always grows. A human being always has to. That's one of the comparisons of a human being to a tree. So we're like going up another loop in the spiral in the same spot that contains the same spiritual energy, the same spot as last year, but on a higher level. Now, this is key, what I'm about to say, and why Pesach has to be in the springtime. Common knowledge is, you know what happened in the springtime? The Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt, from slavery, after hundreds of years. And that's why we celebrate Pesach in Nisan. It's actually the opposite. What do I mean by that? The reason the Exodus occurred during Nisan, during springtime, is because redemption and freedom and the birth of a new nation, which is what happened after redemption, are intrinsic properties of that time of year. They are intrinsic properties of that time of year, of springtime. And I'm going to prove it in a minute. In other words, this season of springtime enabled redemption to happen. It's not like God chose a random time to take them out of Egypt. It needed to be during the season that was conducive, that lended itself to renewal, to redemption, to rebirth. Look outside during springtime. It's less noticeable in California, a whole lot noticeable in the rest of the world, especially where I come from. What do we see in the springtime? I remember as soon as the springtime came in New York, school was over. Poor teachers. It was just party time. We smelled it in the air. The animals give birth, plants, flowers, the weather is beautiful, starts to warm up. It's actually the only time where it's a little bit nice in New York, because once July comes, forget about it. We used to have in our basement in Brooklyn a dehumidifier that would suck the humidity from the air into a gallon tank. Now, what I'm telling you is 100% true. I have witnesses. My mom, my dad, my siblings. I was laying in the basement. That dehumidifier was sucking all of the humidity so I could do something very important during the night. It's called breathing. Then that gallon, after a few hours, would fill up to the top and shut. And I would be woken, not from that shutting, but from the humidity buildup once again. And I have to go and take that gallon of water, pour it out, and stick it back in to the dehumidifier. What's the song? I thank God I'm a Californian. No, that's not how it goes. It says an American. An extra bonus. So, the birds are creating their nests. They're chirping. Everybody is alive. Everybody's happy after a harsh winter season. The Jewish people were redeemed as a result of Hashem, of course, wanting to take them out, but it had to be done during the season. In other words, God Almighty called upon the Jewish people to prepare for the Exodus because the time has arrived, the time in terms of the year, and most importantly, the month, the season, springtime was here. He called them quickly, my kindalach, my kids, my children, I love you, I need to redeem you. This is the season that has arrived for the time of redemption. Let's not miss the boat here. Because once the season is gone, I don't know, God forbid I'd have to wait till the next year. Now we understand a little bit why Pesach has to be during the springtime. Why our calendar is really a lunisolar calendar. It's not a purely lunar calendar. We borrow from the sun. How do we do this? We take the 11-day deficit. Instead of 354, we make it 365, essentially, so that every single year, without fail, Pesach will be celebrated during springtime. And last year was during the end of March, it was still springtime. And the majority of it was in April. And this is, now we understand a little bit more about this whole thing. Now remember the Exodus. The Jewish calendar begins with the first month, which is what? Nisan. The head of the year is Rosh Hashanah. But the first month is Nisan because that is the month that God took the Jewish people out, because that's the month conducive for rebirth, renewal, new opportunity. And this event must be remembered every single day. We actually say it every day in the prayers. And keeping this calendar is a testimony of this event, the monumental event, the all-important event of the Exodus from Egypt. So the Exodus started the cycle of the calendars. It was the first mitzvah God gave them during that season to create the calendar so that we have festivals. And it's a reminder of the Exodus from Egypt, when we became a nation, a new people, during the month of Nisan. So the whole Kiddush HaChedesh, sanctifying the month, and the whole cycle of the month is extremely important. It serves as a reminder of the Exodus, of who we are, that we were once slaves and now we're free. It gives us the ability to celebrate the holidays on their appropriate time, during their appropriate season. So in Egypt, of course, we were steeped in pagan culture. And this event marks the birth of a new nation. We went from slavery to becoming a proud nation of monotheists. The belief in God, the denial of idolatry, and so forth. Now, Gene's going to like this because he likes Rosh Chodesh. Right? He corners the rabbi and said, we got to have minyan on Rosh Chodesh. This is so central. The lessons contained in the Jewish calendar are so central that we actually celebrate it like a holiday on Rosh Chodesh. There's certain restrictions we're not supposed to do on Rosh Chodesh. A woman's not supposed to do laundry on Rosh Chodesh. You know that? I always ran out of socks of Rosh Chodesh. So
Get 32 pair of socks.
The birth of the new moon. The Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, we have Shabbos Mevorchim, the Shabbos that we sanctify the new moon, right? Rosh Chodesh, we have a special prayers that we do on Rosh Chodesh. In the temple, they would bring an extra special sacrifice called the Karban Musaf. That's why we pray the Musaf prayer.
What about Birkat HaLevana?
I'm going to talk about that in a moment. In addition to Shabbat Mevorchim, the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, and on the actual Rosh Chodesh, where we thank God for the new month, we also have the announcing, the broadcasting of the new moon over Israel. You know, I always announce it at the Torah. It's the exact astronomical moment that the new moon will appear over Jerusalem. That's what I announce. Rafi wants to know about the Kiddush Levana. Soon after Rosh Chodesh, usually on the first possible Saturday night, we go out and we sanctify the new moon. And we thank God, we have gratitude in our heart that He granted us His blessings and gave us a new month. Right? We call it what? Kiddush Levana. Right? We have to do this together in the congregation. Kiddush Levana. What do we say, amongst other things, in Kiddush Levana? We say a very powerful statement. Remember I said that the Jewish people are compared to the moon? We like the cycle to be full moon, strong military, secure, protect ourselves against rampant, growing anti-Semitism. We just heard in the news that this politician, it's unbelievable. We want to be a full moon. So what do we ask Hashem when we sanctify the new moon? By the way, so Rosh Chodesh is a big occasion, right? What do we say? We say, amongst other things, that just as the moon became full after completely disappearing, or at least it appeared to be disappearing, so too should the Jewish people merit to become a full moon once and for all, but not disappear again, to stay in that situation. What is the full moon? The coming of Mashiach. May it be speedily in our day. And now, less than an hour into the class, you know the rest of the story. What do we know? What do we know? We know how many days are in a lunar year. We know why we have a leap year, which is an extra month. We know why Passover must be celebrated in springtime. We know why the first mitzvah God gave the Jewish people was Kiddush HaChedesh, to set a calendar. Because the calendar is where it's at. Number one, it reminds us of the Exodus, which is why God gave them the commandment in Egypt. And it gives us our holidays. Without it, there's no Judaism. There's no festivals. And we also know that in addition to Shabbat, which is every week, we have a once-a-month special celebration. It's actually a holiday. In yeshiva, as a kid, we would have donuts every Rosh Chodesh. That's, as far as I was concerned, that's what Rosh Chodesh represented. Donuts from Albany Bakery. That's a big deal. My mother was always reminded when it was Rosh Chodesh, when I came home with chocolate on my nose. What else do we know from this class? That everything in Yiddishkeit, all of the traditions and all of the customs passed down from Moses down to us has a place, has a reason. And we must ask questions, and we must understand, because when we understand, it's meaningful to us. We could not only perform and go through the motions, but live Judaism. And there's only one way of practicing Judaism. We have to live it. We have to enjoy it. It has to be part of our life. We should never ever say, oh, okay, whatever. That is for whatever reason, I guess some rabbi fell on his head, so I drink 4 cups of wine. There's reasons. Why do we drink 4 cups of wine on Passover? Because there's 4 expressions of redemption cited in the Torah. V'hoitzeisi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. I'm just giving you examples. So we must ask questions, we must study, then Judaism will be alive. And then you could take your knowledge and share it with other people, because I bet you the little class that we just had, most Jews out there don't know. And maybe they have these questions. Many, many people have asked me questions about this. This is why I chose this as one of the 6 topics. There are many topics I could have chosen, but I chose this because it always came up. People couldn't understand. Rabbi, if your birthday is September 12th, then it must be the same Hebrew date and English date every year. No, only once every 19 years. Oy vey. Please explain that to me. So I have to sit and explain why it's every once in 19 years, which coincides the same day.
It's like with the holidays. Like Passover came in April last year, and March last year. It's April this year. People say, well, it was early last year. No, it wasn't. It was the exact time it's supposed to come. And when it comes on the 19th this year, that's the time it's supposed to come.
So the city of Laguna Niguel called me up. They sponsor our Hanukkah event. And I've told the story many times how gracious and welcoming they were to us. When I first moved to the city, it was before I even moved here, I asked for a meeting, right? You know about this. And we had, the machers, I guess you could say. And I said, I would like Chabad Laguna Niguel to be part of the city budget. They said, sure, for what? Shabbat dinner? I said, no. I said, you have a tree lighting? Oh, yeah. I said, who pays for it? The city. You have a parade? Yeah. Who pays for it? I said, what about the Jewish population in our city? They don't have anything going on, or a very small thing going on. They said, what is your budget? We'll pay for it. And they've been paying for it every single year since then. And then I get a call when they're building this beautiful city hall a few years ago. And the guy calls me, we're almost done the construction. I said, that's wonderful. Why are you calling me? I know approximately zero about construction. You got to know what you don't know. So the guy says to me, this is a true story, we're putting in the power outside the building. We want to make sure there's enough power for your menorah. Right. So I said, the tree next to it, it needs a whole lot more power than the menorah. I can tell you that. We only have 8 lights. With the shamash, it's 9. But what I was saying was, I'm very good at distracting myself, but what I was saying was, Roberta, so the lady was very cute. She called me up, Colleen, and she said, God, you guys are confusing. Why is Hanukkah at the beginning of December? I mean, last time it would coincide with our holiday. So I gave her a little synopsis of the class. I took a little podium, and I said, okay, listen good. But while I'm on the topic, and this is a true fact also, and I do it with humility, because God doesn't like when we boast. So it's done with humility, okay? You hear me? There's been a couple of times on Hanukkah when it was supposed to rain. Pour, thunder showers. And the city said, listen, we're sponsoring the event. We have our staff here. We put out the tables for you. We have electric wires all over the place. We have to cancel it because the weather forecast, I said, it's not going to rain. I understand you have faith. It's not going to rain. I wrote a letter to the Rebbe. It's not going to rain. So they thought I'm crazy, which is not untrue. And I said, it's not going to rain. And then I said, listen, in New York, when they tell you it's going to rain, it rains. Over here, they're so off all the time. And also the forecasters are very bored. They're like bored. All right. What's the weather? 70. Okay, back to you in the studio. And never did it rain. One year it was supposed to thunder, and it was sunny and hot. One year it was supposed to rain, and it didn't rain, and the sun came out. And she said, how do you do it? I said, special connections. So she told me, it was Allison. It was Allison Giglio. She said to me, listen, she says, in all seriousness, Rabbi, I don't know what you do. I don't do anything. But whoever you speak to, last year when it was supposed to rain at your menorah lighting, it didn't rain, but it poured on our parade. Literally poured on our parade. Do me a favor. Whatever you do, whatever hocus pocus you do for the menorah, do it for the parade. Could you? I said, like a good rabbi, for the right price, of course. You have a deal. Make me a deal, like we used to say in the old country. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Next week, we're going to discover another topic.